So good evening and welcome everyone to the BSIS virtual Atajo sessions. Our host today is Slee. He's a venerable fencer who has been involved in the Brisbane HEMA scene for many years at Vanguard Swordsmanship Academy and more recently at his own school, Long Edge Fencing. So at our school he is a scholar, which he graded into before the pandemic sort of set in, which is fantastic. But he is also a historian. He's a self-proclaimed francophone with an academic background in Renaissance thought, history, literature, and languages. So he's an adept swordsman who fences with rapier, side sword, long sword, and he's going to take us tonight through the work of Agrippa, an underrated figure who has been quite influential in the history of fencing. And he's also going to treat us to some of his hot takes on Agrippa and possible overlaps with LVD. So if you could all please welcome our guest tonight, Slee.
Oh, wow. Thank you. I don't think I've ever had anyone make me feel as competent as that. Okay, let me just see if I can make the technology work to share the screen, which should be happening right about now. Right, okay, let me just manipulate this so that I can see. Right, okay, can you all see the slide?
No, I see two pictures of you.
Oh. Anyone else is the technology?
No, I'm able to see.
I'm seeing things correctly. That's how odd.
What? So is that a yes or a...
I see PowerPoints.
Yeah, I see the PowerPoint.
Yep, okay. Okay. This is Agrippa on a napkin. It's a very short, well, a few napkins. Okay, what I'm going to do tonight is just run through a couple of ideas that help contextualize Camillo Agrippa and his 1553 treatise on the science of arms. So this is going to be very much a background and context setting sort of thing. So is this going to be everything you can learn about Agrippa? Definitely not. Is it going to be a very nuanced look at Agrippa? Well, probably not. Well, let's get stuck in. To understand how much Agrippa actually influenced fencing, we need to have a bit of an idea of what came before. And Agrippa definitely did influence fencing, and we'll talk about that in a little while. So from a Renaissance point of view, we need to talk about what went before, which was the Dark Ages, which really was anything before Petrarch. So, and I've got a nice picture from, I believe that's Marozzo, actually. May not be, I can't quite remember at the moment. But the key elements of teaching here were very medieval. It was rote learning, it was copying what the master does, it was learning set plays or assaults. If you've seen, there's a whole bunch of people like Ross Graham, for one, who has videos of him stepping through Giovanni Dall'Agocchi's assault, which is just stringing together a bunch of different techniques into a flow. And if you read any of the treatises that come out of this sort of time, in this sort of medieval teaching pattern, what you get is long lists of things that you're expected to know. So if your opponent stands in, if your opponent is found in stance X, then you can do A, B, C, D, and you need to know all of that. And also everything has symbolic names, like Guardia della Corno, Unicorn Guard, yeah, Coda Lunga Stretta, the Narrow Longtail, Porta de Ferro, the Iron Door, and all sorts of this, again, long lists of symbolic names. And where this what we'll see is a difference in the understanding of knowledge here. So the swordsmanship that came before is very much characterized as an art rather than a science, and this is why a lot of these early sort of treatises around this time, and I think LVD as well, likes to call itself a science rather than an art. The difference in the medieval and Renaissance mind is that an art is something that is learned through experience and refinement, being taught by a master. It's just, why are we doing things like this, master? Because this is what works. Whereas a science is based on a set of underlying true principles, right? The truest of all true principles being the study of theology. Next comes mathematics and geometry. So is that a hard and fast rule? Well, no, there's nuance to it. There's shades of grey. There's some flavour there, but it's true enough that we can use that. So moving on from that, we come to the modern Enlightenment, where we've got, among others, there's some names we know, but we don't have manuscripts for. There is Camillo Agrippa, who for his day job was actually a civil engineer. He built a bunch of bridges in Italy, some of which still exist. He's famous for moving the obelisk in St. Peter's Square, so that I don't think it's St. Peter's Basilica. I think it's the church that came before that could be built, and this is the obelisk that came over from Egypt with the Caesars. He's also famous for putting in a water system for the Medici Palace on the Venetian Hill in Rome. So this is where he actually got his fame during his life. But the thing he did is he brought geometry and a simplified understanding of things and a new understanding of things to fencing. So when you look at his work, you will notice that it is all based on lines and circles. It's time and distance, it's force and momentum, or impetus is probably the more sort of correct term for Renaissance. And you know, this sort of stuff will be familiar from the concerns that LVD is keen to highlight in the texts. What else? He moved away from that medieval rote learning system of instruction towards a more sort of principles based, where we start getting, you know, simple building blocks and combining simple building blocks and simple conceptual ideas to build up the fencing system. And I put this picture in here because it shows. This is one of the plates from his text, and it shows. I think it shows a lot about the man. So you can see the architectural achievements in the background with the obelisks. But more importantly, if you have a look at what's going on in the picture, you can see the main figure there is Agrippa. On the left you've got the modern men in their modern clothes who are trying to rescue him from the attacking hands of the medieval doctors in their university gowns. So you can see he's quite conscious that he's trying to break away and do something new and different. So, and he's also arrogant. You can't read him without thinking this is a guy who has no doubts about his own grandeur and importance. Okay, so moving on to the fencing. Now, I'm not going to go through everything, but you can see from this is he's simplified the guard positions, whereas Marozzo, I think it has 14 different guards, all with symbolic names. Agrippa doesn't. He has 4 basic guards, just labelled A, B, C, D. So no symbolic names, just pure indexes. And the 4 guards have 4 different arm positions, which we still use today, actually. So it's 450 years, and we're still using basic principles brought in by Agrippa. Although the thing to note here is that these are arm positions; these are not hand positions. So it's not the prime or prima being the high guard with fingernails to the outside, B or secunda being fingernails down, C being fingernails to the left, D being fingernails up. It's not that's the arm position. So A is defined as having a narrow stance. See, that's part of the simplification as well. The stance is either wide or narrow. You don't have porta de ferro, you don't have coda longa, you don't have all of that. So A is defined with the arm high, point at the enemy's face, narrow stance. B is the arm at shoulder height, narrow stance. C is the arm low on the right-hand side. D is with a wide stance. D is a wide stance with the arm across the body to the inside. So and there's a whole bunch of letters for intermediate stances that get used when you work through an entire attack, which we'll do in a sec. But one of the things that stands out to me, and this could purely be idiosyncratic because no one else seems to pay a huge amount of attention to it, is that he has really one key tactical point and tactical difference, which we'll talk about in a sec. And this is I've got half a notion that this is where the LVD connection comes in. But okay, so let's move on from that. So I will actually read this out. This is it. He talks about the sphere or the ball, and apart from this being the most geometrically perfect object, which has got a whole bunch of connotations of its own, it is also the key point in his fencing. And I'll read it out first, then I'll point some things out in the picture, and we'll move on to another image where I can show it to you in action. So this you have to imagine. Okay, so I'll read it, and I hate reading slides, but I'll read this one just to get it on the recording. If one places the sphere spoken of on the ground, wanting to stab it from whatever side as skillfully as one can or can imagine, one will be unable to make the blow stick. Now he's talking about thrusting here, so this is particularly with the point. And this is owing to its motion, which normally faces and inclines towards the centre, and even if it is hit along the diameter, rarely will this penetrate. Now, if you think about that, if you have a if you have like a large ball in front of you and you try to thrust at it, it is either going to roll away from you if you hit it dead center. If you hit it to the left or the right, it will spin out towards the other direction. If you hit it on the right, it will spin away to the left. If you hit it on the left, it will spin away to the right. And this was the key penny drop moment for me when I understood this chapter, which goes on for pages. It is the longest chapter in the book. But this, I think, is the key to getting a handle on Agrippa. If you have a look at the picture now, if you have a look at the arms, you can see the arms there are in stance C. You know, the sword arm is low and to the right. However, we've got a different stance. It's not the wide stance of C. This is a narrow stance, and if you look, all the weights on the right foot. This is part of the deal with Agrippa's images is he's trying to show some sort of trying to show a degree of dynamism in it, which will become clear in the next one. You can see there's a movement there from C to bring the left foot in, and this is called stance F. And this, I think, is the key to Agrippa. So moving right along. Where are we? Come on, work. Work. Here we go. So let me just let me just hide this stuff. Okay, this one we actually read right to left. And this is trying to show a flow of motion. So if you look at the dude on the far right with the beard and the fashionable haircut actually has three movements there, and you can see them with them being superimposed. Dude on the left has two actions. So how to read this? On the far right, you can see the guy labelled C. You can't see his sword, that's been taken away for clarity. You can see his dagger, which looks remarkably short. But you can see he's in stance C. Sword arm low and to the right, wide stance. Then what he does is he brings his left foot forward up to his right foot. And you can see that in the second image there labelled F. He's extended his arm as well. So there's stance F. At this stage, dude on the left, who was also in F or IVF or MF or some dodgy scribble there, has had this sword come in at him. And what he's decided to do is a counter time strike in action I, which is just basically a thrust in third or a straight thrust. Dude on the right in F has provoked this action. From there, to capitalize on this, F on the right moves into stance K, which is hard to see here. The main aspects of this is that K's right foot has stepped right across his body to take his body leaning out to the left, while he's left his sword on the line, on the center line, the line of attack, for dude on the left I to walk onto the point. So this is Agrippa trying to show a flow in one diagram, and the text basically goes through goes through what I just said in many, many, many more words. So, but there's a couple of things here, and this is where I think I'll just throw this in. If you take that stance F and just raise that arm up to shoulder level, what does that look like to an LVD practitioner? Does that look, yeah, that could be a right angle guard. That provocation, there's two types of provocation that Agrippa talks about. He talks about entering into measure where there's an opening, and you just enter into measure and threaten with guard, with stance F, you threaten the opening. Or you can enter into measure with guard F with what he calls force. The word is sforza, SFORZ A or O, depending on gender, which can mean force, compulsion, and interestingly can also mean constraint. So I don't know. I can potentially see an argument for the development of the right angle guard, as well as even possibly the beginnings of something like an Atajo here. Now, I don't know. That's probably reading too much into it, but let's keep going. Okay, so yeah, stance F is key. Stance F is the ball, that narrow stance with the arm extended in a provocation, entering into measure either by force or by poking at an opening. This is how you break into guard. And there's a lot of letters in that diagram, but I'll just I'll explain them quickly. So if you're starting in stance C or stance D, which are ones he recommends for waiting, as waiting stances. If your opponent attacks, you can withdraw the right foot, lift your arm up either shoulder height or above shoulder height, so that stances A and B at the back there. Or you can move forward into stance F by bringing your left foot up to by bringing your rear foot up to your right foot. And then it depends on what the opponent does. You've moved your left foot up to your right foot, you put your weight on you moved your rear foot up to your front foot, you put your weight on your rear foot, and with your right foot you step out. You either step out across your body to the inside into action K, or you step out to your outside in what Agrippa calls actions G or P, and the difference there is where you're targeting on the opponent's where you're targeting on the opponent's body. G and P is otherwise known as a volte or an ingirata, or if your opponent retreats or just does nothing, you can just move forward and basically attack either nails up or nails down in actions H or I. So there's a whole bunch of stuff there, but that I think is the key tactical innovation in Agrippa. Now, if you change that diagram around and just above the H and I box, if that's where you put your opponent and use that as the center of a circle going through F, you've immediately outlined your offensive and probably defensive distance as well. And then and if you do that, then action G and action GP and action K, the foot movements there just become traverses, become LVD traverses. So I don't know. I don't know whether I'm reading too much into this because I haven't studied the LVD sources. But I can see if we need to make forge a path between Agrippa and LVD, I can see a way to do it. It's just whether it's real or not, I don't know. Someone who knows more would probably enjoy getting into that. And also, this, just to note, this is the cleaned up version of the original Agrippa on a napkin, which was actually drawn on a napkin in the Virgin Lounge after a dare by Jay Mackley from Glecker. Okay, so just at the end, I just want to restate these sort of flows that I talked about there. So you end up getting this basic attack syntam or paradigm, where you start out of measure. When you get to wide measure, which means you can't hit someone with just the movement of an arm or an arm and a small step. That's where you adopt stance C or stance D. This wide-footed stance, hand low either on the inside or the outside, just waiting patiently. When you want to make something happen, you move into close measure by moving your rear foot up and advancing your arm. And this provides a test. So you're moving into engagement to see what the opponent does. And the opponent will do something. They'll advance or retreat. They'll act strongly on your blade, or they won't, or they'll try a counter time action. Whatever it is, you respond to that, either by moving straight ahead or by moving off to one side or the other. Then you recover. And if it all goes horribly wrong, if you're at wide measure and the opponent, and you have this real nice plan of moving from C to F into something, and the opponent inconsiderately interrupts this by attacking you first, again, you go from wide stance in C, moving your front foot back towards your left foot, lifting your hand, so you're in stances A and B. And then one example is beat the sword with the offhand and thrust, then recover back as well. So I know I haven't gone through the stances in any degree of detail. I'm not sure that that's needed at this stage. The key point is that F. It's the key tactical foundation to Agrippa, and I think once you understand that and you can see that in the text, Agrippa becomes much more understandable. You can see why he's got all the sticks describing how to draw circles and hexagons and stuff, like all that geometry through the text. You understand how he's different to what came before. And it becomes much more useful as a fencing text. Now, I will propose, but not hold it terribly strongly, that stance F is the forerunner. Stance F is the forerunner of the right angle guard as well as the Atajo. That's a proposition. I'll put it there. People can argue yes or no. I'd be very interested in the answers. But basically, that's it. That's all I really wanted to talk about. This is this background image is another image from Agrippa where he shows that you actually get more distance with it by using the point than you do by using the edge. You can see how he's just trying to ground everything in the true knowledge of geometry. There are currently 2 English translations of Agrippa that I know of. The more recent is by Gerrit Schwanger, and I quite like this one. This is a translation written by a fencer for fencers. So is there some interpretation going on there? Yes, there is, but it's done intelligently and it's called out in footnotes. The other fencing text is by Ken Monsheen, and that is a wonderfully academic text, but sometimes it's probably a more, what would I say? It's probably a more academically correct translation, but that at times means it can be a little bit dense and a little bit hard to understand. Whereas the Swanger one is very, very easy to understand. I like both, and I like swapping between the translations in the two, because I find that gives you a different perspective as well. But in short, that's basically it, and basically what I wanted to say. I think there is a bunch of good stuff in there that anyone interested in LVD can really sink their teeth into if they want to, if you want to use Agrippa as a source text for the development of LVD. But as I said, I've made my proposition, so I'll leave that to others to judge, to argue that out and judge the value with that. Wow, everyone's been very quiet. Any questions? Anything you want me to cover again?
Yeah, Doug's not being quiet, which is why I am.
Oh, there's a disaster somewhere.
Julian did have a question further up in the
Yeah, I don't want to talk to Chris.
which was, I think.
Now, I know that your revelation, regarding the sphere sort of unlocked the whole text for you. Because I haven't read the whole text, I'm still not very clear. I understand, like, the diagram's great. It shows the sphere, and then it shows him about to do a move against the sphere. I understand, but the sphere's down on the ground. So was that saying something about the center of your opponent, or am I just totally misinterpreting that? Sorry, I'm completely ignorant.
No, I think that's more a function of gravity.
So what he's saying is respond like the sphere. If he comes in on this side, go that way. Comes in on this side, go that way.
So you're the sphere. I got the impression that you were attacking the sphere. All right, so when the sword is coming at you, then
see the ball
like a sphere.
Yes, you move like the sphere. Because he's using. Yeah, you're the sphere. When someone attacks you, if someone attacks to your outside, you turn to your inside. If they're attacking you on the inside, you turn to your outside. Or you use that to attack as well. You come from your nice defensive stance into stance F as the ball, with your weapon, straight out in front of you, or doing something to provoke the opponent. And when they react, like if they react this way, I turn this way to create that line and create an opening.
See, I would suggest that's kind of counter to LVD, because most of LVD actions are towards the threat. So it's like when it's coming in on that inside, we actually push back against it and cross that line.
Yeah, well, that can happen. That can happen as well. It depends on. That's where the nuance comes in here. That we just haven't. That just can't be captured briefly. If you have entered with force and maintain that force, yes, you can use that. But in general, he will step away from the so if the opponent's sword's going to the outside, he'll step to the inside.
Yeah, but I can kind of see how you can get from one to the other. Whether or not that's how they actually got from one to the other is a different question. But if you just change a few principles, you say, okay, we like Agrippa, but we think that you need to be as far as possible away from your opponent, which will change some of the things that you do in the way you hold your sword. And then you say, all right, but also we believe you should always be defended. So that will mean I need to have my sword on top of his. So you add a few principles of Destreza on top, and that changes a few things. And I can see how you can get from one to the other with a few changed principles.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think it I think it's a lot more fundamental. I don't know who else in a treatise approached fencing so mathematically. And I think it's just the aspect of that scientific mathematical approach that really caught Carranza's attention. Understanding what I remember from the lecture that Puck gave, which is basically that Carranza was looking at society and going, this is an absolute mess. We need to approach this rationally to fix it. And so that rational, mathematical, scientific approach is, I think, the main connector. I think there may be more deeper or more nuanced connections, but I'm just not capable of seeing them right now.
So did anyone read what Ryan's comments were? Because they like pop up too quickly for me to see.
They're also 1,000 pages long. But yeah, but immediately after Agrippa, like definitely in the 20 years after Agrippa, there are two responses to him. There's one in an English translation by Pier Marco Terminello and Joshua Pendragon, called Camillo Palladini and the Art of Fencing, where basically he's recreated Agrippa's picks, just completely just stole them, redid them. And he does pick a few holes in Agrippa. He says, I like this bit, but I don't like this bit. So there was definitely a reaction there. There's another Italian text. I want to say Livigno, but it's not. It's a name like that. It's not Livigno because he's someone later and completely different, but it's a name like that. It's not been translated into English. I've got a copy, but I can't read it for the life of me because I don't know Italian. And again, from in talking to Pier Marco about this, apparently he just bags out Agrippa and says, "No, you got it wrong here. You got it wrong here. This won't work. It won't work on Tay streets." And apparently gets quite stuck in. So
yeah, it seems to me that they say that Agrippa is the system written by a mathematician that's never really held a sword in his life. So I guess that's the kind of dirt they might be saying.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure that's true. I'm sure like every upwardly mobile young professional with cash in his pocket is going to a fencing school. But yeah, what qualifies him? What qualifies him in his mind to write a fencing textbook? Well, he understands geometry.
And the ball.
Yeah, well, the most perfect shape. The most perfect shape is the sphere.
So you're talking about stance F. You can certainly see the later Neapolitan arm posture for that. There's a little more forward tilt than we'd expect from an LVD stance.
Yep.
But that certainly is not beyond some of the right angle adjustments where they go into that leaning forward to counter the lower threats. But you're also saying that it could be with force or with control, come into the proto-Atajo sort of thing, into that area. Do you want to explore what you mean by how it's also the base for the Atajo?
Just because if you're entering with force, you are dominating, or in effect, you are dominating or subjecting the opponent's blade. So using those terms in a typical fencing manner. So you are taking the point offline so that they're not threatening you, but you're threatening them, so that they have to act. So the Atajo in LVD is posited as a defensive tool, but if you think about using it in an offensive manner, coming from out of distance into offensive distance with an Atajo on your opponent's blade, I can see an argument that is entering into stance F with force.
Yeah, and using the Atajo offensively, much as they call it a defense, like you say, it's the setup to all of your offensive actions, especially later on Rada, where he's starting to move forward with his Atajo, so you can see that there. And same in Thibaut, where he's using the Atajo, or the same sort of entering by graduating the control of the blade. You can sort of see how that might fit into what you're saying with this enter with force.
Yeah, so I was yeah, I'm not going to say that this is definitely a thing. I'm just trying to find the hooks that can prompt the discussion. And when I saw in the period Italian English dictionary by Florio, 16, seeing that sforza can also mean constrain, I mean, that's an interesting connection. Whether it's real or not, I don't know. But yeah, entering into measure in a narrow stance with your arm out, controlling the opponent's blade before you make an attack by stepping to one side or the other with your right foot, doesn't sound a million miles away from an LVD attack sequence. So you guys tell me. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up because I got the camera on me.
Sorry, I'm trying to catch up on Ryan chat because that's normally a good source of the interesting things. Your last message, which I think leads on from our F thing, he's basically said in the illustration before he says that the straight line has advantages. He does say that C can thrust from the position they're in. Looks real Atajo, and then he has a link to a JPEG. Which
yes, he does talk about the straight line and the point being quicker than the edge. That the straight line will beat the crooked line. So which is basically in these terms, you can in Italian fencing terms, while someone's preparing a cutting strike, you can beat them with a properly angled thrust, so a counter time attack into preparation, or in LVD terms, a thrust into the opponent's dispositive action. Yeah, that's a big thing for it. So you have to remember it's 1553 and people are using side swords, and they're what we would call side swords, and they're cutting a lot. He's saying, no, don't do that, emphasize the point. But while he does do that, he also talks about the crooked line beating the straight line, and this is where the steps offline, either to the inside in action K or to the outside in actions G and P, come in, because you won't have that straight line out in front. You'll be going to the side with your weapon, one side or the other with your weapon out. So when you're doing that, if I can show it here, you can see my sword finger, and I'm leaning over to my inside. The opponent's sword is coming up through here and missing me. So how or whether that translates to LVD, I don't know.
Just comparing this with the only text that I'm somewhat familiar with, which is Saviolo. It seems that, like, Saviolo is a very practical manual. It came out on the year that Agrippa died, and its manual is very much about the day-to-day of swordsmanship. It's very, very much talking about what's happening at the time, what people do, how they react, how they talk. That's very much a description of a sword school and the way that it acts. In Agrippa's manual, we've seen pictures of geometry and we're talking about very abstract concepts. Is that the way it's written throughout?
Oh, yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
So is that quite typical of the time, or is that...
Oh, no, I think that's more Agrippa trying to prove his street cred.
Yeah, and I think that's also something Trend is also known for, right? It's that breakaway from the, what did you call it? The descriptive, here's what you do, A to B to C to D, into the more, this is why you do. Use these principles of mathematics.
Yeah, I think it's very much trying to highlight that this isn't your granddad's sword play. This is new, hip, funky. Where with it we can use all the cool words with the youth of today.
Saviolo, your classic person, student says to master, "Oh, master, but what shall I do if he attacketh me on the right-hand side?" Master, "Oh, well, there is a play for that."
Yes, yes.
Yeah, included in his fencing textbook, Agrippa includes in his fencing textbook, and he talks about it actually during the fencing textbook as something that's vital. And if you understand this, you will understand swordplay. He talks about how he's got a whole dialogue on how you can use a stick to make a circle in the ground, and from that turn it into a model of the cosmos. And it goes on. It actually takes up about a quarter of the book. It's long. It's really, really long. You know, why in a fencing textbook? Because I'm showing that what I'm doing is new. It fits with the modern. It fits in the modern world. We're not like those old superstitious medieval types who lived in the Dark Ages. All our stuff is not based on mere experience. It is based on universal and unchanging principles of true knowledge.
Yeah, and I think Lois just reiterated that that's probably the strongest link between Kranz's and Agrippa's work, is that, we're using true proven techniques. We build it up from the principles of circles and maths and so forth.
Yeah, and that's very much a concern of the time. It's very much the intellectual project of the time, working out what are the true principles, how do the true principles apply to what we've merely just what we've learned from mistakes.
So Tybalt also uses a geometric form in his manual quite extensively, but he also uses the conversational style, and he has his two people that have a bit of a chat. And one guy's the doofus, and the other guy's the cool guy, and they're constantly doing their plays. But the illustrations in that really do embrace that geometric form, and the introduction also talks about how the act of swordsmanship echoes the geometry of the cosmos and the perfection of the human form and all the rest of it.
Yep. Yeah.
So I suppose he's alluding back to things like Agrippa that were...
It's the scientific project of the time. So I think it would be a mistake to say that it necessarily came from Agrippa because of that. That's just part of the intellectual project of the time. So yeah, both of them. And who is it? Is it Saviolo who's got all the diagrams with angles and?
Tybalt has that.
He's got that. Capoferro's got some of it in proving why the long lunge is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Docciolino's got that. Even if you go to an uneducated thug like Didier, he's got triangles and squares rather than circles. But there's I think there's some other things going on there. So finding the hidden truth in the world, the hidden geometry in the world is definitely just part of the project, intellectual project at the time.
Ryan in the chat was just making the point about the diagram that you showed with the geometry of all the different angles.
That one that I've used as a background. So if I show this one again, how do we do this? That one I've got as a background there. There's one in Capoferro which shows.
There's three parts to that. The first part is the sword. The second part is the lean of the body. And the third part is the leg, isn't it?
Yeah, the knee. So I don't have. Actually, I may have. If you bear with me a sec, I may actually have a copy of that one from Capoferro. Oh, work, Windows, work. Boom.
Yeah, Ryan's just put a link to it there.
Has he? Damn him.
He's put a link to that diagram that you're showing, and it seems to me, and I'm probably mistaken, it seems to me that the angles that the foot actually goes are quite deep. I mean, I always hear about, I don't know anything about Capoferro other than you have that really deep forward lunge. Yep. It just seems to me that diagram seems to incorporate a pretty deep forward lunge as well.
I don't. Yes, there is definitely a lean, but I'm not sure.
It's one heck of a lean. That's lean K. I don't know.
Don't know.
You want to take it to its natural conclusion.
I'm not going to argue against you, but I'm in two minds about whether that's
right. The second diagram that actually just focuses on the knee.
Here we go. Here's the one. For God's sake. Come on, technology, work.
Okay. The point is, in the rest of his illustrations, the deepest lunge is not that deep.
No, it's really not. So if I share this is the image out of Capoferro. So this is, what's this? Is this 1620? Oh.
So,
1610 should be for Capoferro.
Yeah.
If you were to superimpose and mirror that on the original diagram that you had, it does fit. Just saying.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure that's going to work. But yeah, see, this is how, Capoferro's got the same geometry from body parts going all over the place. So geometry is definitely
Yeah, they seem to try extra hard to stick triangles in places there. Like that one where it's like from mid-crotch to his knee to his foot, and you go, yeah, there's no third side to that triangle. You've just made that up.
Yeah, pretty much. Which gets, yeah, and that whole deep lunge thing gets me onto another point that I'm exploring at the moment, because there's a bunch of writers, including the ones in French that LEF is basing itself on, who say the long lunge is what idiots do. Because how do you recover from it? You can only do that on nice flat fencing hall floors. You can't do it on cobblestones. You can't do it on rough ground.
Also, if you do your hamstrings in the middle of a fight, you're pretty much done for. So,
yeah, but that's a whole different rant.
So another thing that people say about Agrippa that's illustrated in the image behind me is this whole thing of turning the other way in order to increase your extension.
He doesn't say it's to increase your extension.
I thought that's what it was for.
Yeah, other people say it's to increase the extension. I can't remember. Saying that, but I could be proven wrong there. I'm fine. I'm happy to be proven wrong. But amongst other things, it's to protect your eyes. If you have a look at the other one, the Action K, where he's stepping, where if it was me doing it, I'm stepping that way. The hand comes up there. Because you want,
it's not up there.
Yeah, you want extra.
Oh, I see.
You're looking down, and my left hand's coming up here to protect my head and protect my eyes.
So in this case, maybe he's protecting his hand and his head.
Well, maybe, yeah. It's just, yeah. The rear arm goes back as a balance, and I think that's to get some extra extension, but the turning the head is I think to protect your face.
Because if you do turn your head, it feels like you've got extra extension.
Yeah, it may well do, but I'm not entirely sure that's the reason for it.
But the number of people that are saying step them through the eye, you kind of think that, yeah, getting your eyes out of there seems to be pretty big on their mind.
Yeah, well, without fencing masks and lots of pointy sticks going around, there's bound to be some old person sitting on a bench going, "You kids are going to put your eyes out."
I'm pretty sure I've read plenty of accounts of people who did lose eyes in fencing practice accidents. So
yeah, well, hasn't that always been said? That's the way to tell a fencing master, because you'll be missing an eye and half a dozen teeth.
Should have worn a bigger hat.
That's right. Yes.
That's pretty much why I started at school, right? Nearly lost an eye. It must be time to start school.
Okay, I think I might just stop the recording there, and then we might just pivot into just opening it up so everyone can just kind of socialize for the next little bit. Thank you, Chris, so much for presenting tonight. We really appreciate it. And,
thank you, and we're right into combat time, so nice work.
Yeah, thank you.
yeah.